Spooky season is upon us, and in celebration of crunchy spicy leaf time being in full swing, I thought we'd create a cute little ghosty. I have a pretty clear vision for this project, so we'll start by sketching it out. Our ghosty will be enjoying a teacup bubble bath because, let's be honest, dead or alive, there is no better way to relax. I've been on the brink of death many times and been brought back by a bubble bath, so who knows, perhaps it will work some magic. I want our ghosty to look relaxed in her bath. And I also had an idea that perhaps she could have a little pumpkin shower cap, removable, of course, in case she wants to wash her hair, but I thought it would kind of tie in nicely. I want this ghost to glow, so I'm using this blue glow-in-the-dark cosplay that I got from the US. My trusty soft pastels, they're a bit tatty now, but a great staple. A teacup, of course. This is one I picked up from a charity shop. Will do the job, has got a nice leafy pattern on it, ties in well. A rolling pin. Oops, runaway rolling pin. Stay there, thank you. Aluminium or aluminum foil, and a selection of tools. Off camera, I condition the clay and we'll start by rolling it out. It's important to roll it on a surface that the clay will peel off of, as it can stick to certain surfaces, so I've used some greaseproof paper to help with that. Then I made an aluminium armature, wrapping it in masking tape so that the foil doesn't pierce the clay. Taking our rolled out clay, place it over the top of the armature and start forming the ghost shape. I'm trying to consider where the folds in the ghost would look best, but most of these started to form naturally as I went along. I futzed around with it until I was somewhat happy. Testing it out for size in the teacup is also really important, making sure that it's going to fit and that it's going to look the way that you want it to. In my original sketched out design, my ghost had more of a tail hanging over the end of the teacup, so I go in here and I just cut off some excess clay at the back, as you're not going to see it and cosplay is so expensive I must use it sparingly. And then I'm just going to take that bit of clay that I cut off and I'm going to add it onto the tail section. This will really transform the shape of the ghost, and this clay blends so beautifully it really doesn't matter if you're adding additional clay onto other pits that you have already sculpted. As you can see, it blends seamlessly in there and I'm just so happy with how easy that was. Now I'm much happier with the shape, I'm going to go in and reinforce all of those folds again, placing it back onto that armature and just kind of fussing around and making sure that those folds are looking nice and clean. I'm really struggling to try and get the tail in the particular position that I want it in to kind of make it look like it's floating and that it's got that ethereal ghost-like texture to it. So you see me throughout the video just fussing around with that, but I eventually get to a point where I'm happy with it. Using Surgical Spirit is a brilliant tool to get off any dust that the clay might have picked up as you have been sculpting, so you can just see me cleaning up our ghosty here. This silicone tool is great for smoothing out clay and defining soft lines. I want the folds to look as natural as possible, so this tool is perfect for that. So I am now finally super happy with the shape, so we're going to go in and start placing the eyes. Please enjoy yet another close-up shot of my hand. Note my gorgeous nails, shout out to Sophie. We do get lucky and get a couple of seconds of focus footage here, but please bear with me, you can get the gist. I really like the downcast eyes that I've seen ghosts with in illustrations lately, so I tried to mirror that kind of vibe. It gives spooky as well as cute, which I think is exactly what this ghost needs. So I've pushed all the way through the clay right to the armature, so when I remove it, there will just be some little holes left. Going back in with my cotton bud and my Surgical Spirit, I'm just smoothing everything out and making it look nice and neat and tidy. My favourite way to colour clay or add any kind of dimension is by using soft pastels. It gives a really matte finished effect as opposed to acrylic, which can look quite plasticky and shiny. So it's important to do this before you bake it, otherwise the pastels won't stick to the clay. So I'm going to start out with the grey, and just having the tiniest amount on my brush, I'm going to go in and try and define those eyes and just give them a little bit more dimension. I want the eyes to stand out, and because they are just going to be holes, I feel like adding a little bit of darkness around them will give that spooky vibe as well as just draw some attention to those. And yes, I really did regret the fact that I graded it on the left and that I am right-handed. It became very irritating to not put my left hand in the pastels. Bringing you in a little bit closer just so you can see how much pastel I'm putting onto the ghost. It is much easier to build it up as opposed to taking it away. So again, enjoy some lovely close-ups of my fingers, my beautiful nails, but hopefully this allows you to see just how much I'm actually putting on. And then going in with a Q-tip and just taking away any of that excess that's around the eyes. So our little ghosty just loves a hot bath, so naturally she's going to have flushed cheeks. So we're just going in, giving her a little bit of blusher, again building up very tentatively. We don't want to slap too much on there, it is much more difficult to take it off. So I build up her cheeks until I'm happy, and then I pop her in the oven. I didn't put the teacup in as I didn't want it to break in the temperature, so I just took her out very gently and placed her on a bed of corn flour, which was on a baking tray, and then popped that in the oven.
2 hours later.
So here she is, out of the oven, she's had time to cool, and my next task is trying to take out this armature. So you can see there is some of the corn flour left there, but sitting her on a bed of corn flour allows for the clay to maintain its shape. So I used some of my tools to try and release the armature by poking it through the eye holes. This was a little trickier than I had hoped, and it was just a case of trying to gradually release things and slowly wiggling it out. Using different tools, the scissors really helped to twist it, but here you finally see it give. There was an internal scream of joy, and then I just go in and quickly tidy up the eye holes. And here she is. I have decided to name her Gertie Ghost. I feel like that has a lovely ring to it, and she's looking beautiful already. I'm super happy. So before we can fill up her bath, she needs her shower cap. So we're going to start by creating another foil armature that's going to fit on her head. So fussing around with it so it creates a kind of dome shape, and then making sure that it's going to sit on her head in the place that I want it to. So once I was happy and I had it to the right shape, I just decided that it wasn't quite dome enough and I wanted the pumpkin to have a little bit more height. So once I did that, I went in with some masking tape and I just smoothed it all off, much like I did in the first instance with the foil armature in the beginning. I don't want the shower cap to glow in the dark, so I'm just conditioning some regular cos clay in order to build the pumpkin. Going back in with the trusty rolling pin and rolling out the clay evenly to cover the shower cap base. Once it is rolled flat, just popping it over the top and being really careful to make sure you haven't got any air bubbles. I've made this mistake in the past and it does crack the clay. This rounded ball-like tool is so helpful for just smoothing things out. They come in a variety of different shapes and sizes, and I would really recommend them if you are just starting out with clay. I really don't want the shower cap to be too bulky, so I'm trying to use the thinnest layer of clay as possible. Particularly on the inside, as I need to make sure it still fits Gertie's head. Once it's completely covered, it's time to start doing the pumpkin pattern. So you can see me poke a hole in the top just so I have somewhere central to work from, and then just creating those stereotypical pumpkin lines. I poke a hole right through the top so that I can go in with some wire in order to make a nice sturdy stalk. Just using that same tool, going in and adding a little bit more definition in between those sections. As I mentioned, I'm now just going in with a bit of craft wire, poking it through the top and then bending it down with some pliers, giving it a nice little sturdy pull so to make sure that it's embedded in the clay and it is not going to scratch the top of Gertie's head. Grabbing a small amount of cos clay, I'm going to try and trim down that wire a little bit first and then go in and start sculpting the stalk. Placing that bit of cos clay on there and then starting to blend it into the main pumpkin body. There is some real joy in sculpting natural things, as nature has a way of making things perfectly imperfect. So just going back in with that stylus tool and flattening it so it makes it look as if someone has come along and had chopped it from its pumpkin patch. Adding some lines on there again with that nice sharp pokey tool just to give it a little bit of definition. Back to our soft pastels, we've got a nice vibrant orange for our pumpkin shower cap. And then just going in with a much bigger brush than before and just painting that all over the pumpkin in order to try and get that lovely vibrant orange that we are so used to seeing when it comes to Halloween. So I've got a nice bright orange pumpkin, but it does feel a little bit flat. So I'm taking a nice kind of brown colour and just going in and trying to add a bit more dimension, particularly down the segments. I then took a smaller brush and just went in and added a little bit more definition along those segments as well. And for the stalk, a nice khaki green, just going around and making sure to fill in all of those nice grooves and lines to get it nice and textured. Once it's all coloured in, it's time to pop it in the oven. So looking at shower caps, a lot of them have a kind of frill around the outside, and I wanted to mirror that, so I found this lace, and my aim is to try and bunch it up and sew it and then try and stick it around the outside to kind of mirror that stereotypical shower cap. Keeping with our colour theme, I went in with some green ink and dyed it. Once I had done the length of the lace, I took a needle and thread with some white cotton, and then I just started to sort of bunch it up and stitch as I went. I'm sure for the sewists out there, they are cursing me at this point. I am not a sewist. It is not something that I'm overly confident with, but it generally did do the trick. So keeping on brand, my fingers are yet again in the way, but hopefully you can kind of see how I am just looping it on and off the needle. Then it was just a case of figuring out how I was going to attach it to the pumpkin. Attaching it around the bottom seemed to be the most logical option, so I took my handy dandy glue gun, just making sure that everything is all ready to go, and then I just glued it gradually in piece by piece around the bottom of the pumpkin. The greaseproof paper again is just protecting my surface, and it means that I can just press down really firmly to make sure that the lace has stuck to the pumpkin. And voila! A crown fit for a queen. All that's left to do now is to create the water for her bubble bath. So I'm using an epoxy resin, which is part A and B. I decided that this would be a lot better than UV resin, as I had a feeling that the UV resin would not be able to cure through the polymer clay. Before anyone comes for me, I know I deserve to be in craft prison. I did not wear gloves. You should wear gloves when dealing with resin. I know this. I was super careful. I didn't have any gloves on hand, and I was quite frankly too impatient to order any. So I'm sorry, please don't come for me. So I just guesstimated roughly how much resin I was going to need. I did actually end up needing to make up a little bit more later, but this was pretty good getting going. So I took Gertie out in order to pour the first batch because I didn't want there to be sitting any air bubbles underneath her. Obviously she is hollow, so I just removed her for the purpose of pouring in the first batch and then placing her gently inside the resin, figuring out what angle I wanted her to sit at. As you can see, this was the point where I realised I was going to need a bit more resin so that she was actually submerged in the water, but I wanted just to test out my bubble theory. I got these weighted beads and a combination between these beads and some really fine ones, and just tried experimenting with making the water look like it had mini bubbles in it. So I went back in with the resin, just topping it up and making sure that she was fully submerged in her bubble bath. I then went back in with my beads just to create that bubble effect, so I'd almost layered them and just sort of went to town with it. Once I was happy, I popped her aside and waited for the resin to cure, and then it's ready for the reveal.